So it was a couple days before Christmas last year, and friends and family were arriving. I could hear them coming, arriving downstairs. And I was laying in the bedroom upstairs in a state of shock. I lead a global program for restoring sight for people in India. And I just got a phone call confirming that basically the program had collapsed. There's a New York-based international NGO that had basically taken our strategy and created a competing initiative. And this competing initiative had essentially completely cut us out of the initiative, and they were busy taking our partners, our Indian partners, away from us. So before I go further, let me tell you a little bit about what I do and give you a little bit more background around this Christmas coup. So 9 months earlier, I'd come out of retirement to join SightLife, a small global nonprofit. And essentially, SightLife restores sight to people. The core of the operation is that of being a corneal tissue bank. So we essentially recover corneas from donors, process it, and provide corneas around the world to support corneal transplants. If you look up on the screen, this is what corneal blindness looks like. This is Manoj, who's 11 years old, and he's living outside Hyderabad in India. This is a close-up of Manoj's eyes. I don't know how well everyone can see it, but for him, trying to see through that eye is like looking through frosted glass. The good news is that a corneal transplant is a relatively simple procedure, where damaged tissue is removed and replaced with healthy tissue, restoring sight for many suffering from this form of blindness. So here we have Manoj with a successful transplant. He was able to see within 2 days, and the stitches were all removed within a year. That's the good news. Bad news is that there are millions of people around the world who are in need of this simple procedure. The waiting list, if you will, is about 10 million people waiting for corneal surgery. And the biggest problem is a lack of corneal tissue, and that's where SightLife comes in. So this is the point of the story where I usually get asked, so are you a doctor? I'm not. In fact, I skipped high school biology, and I have a rather alarming tendency to faint at the sight of blood. No, my connection, my career move to SightLife is really a coffee to corneas story. So how did I get there? So as Paul mentioned, prior to SightLife, I've been an executive at Starbucks for 17 years. And I love doing strategy work. I led a lot of the strategic initiatives at Starbucks. And when I left, after those 60-hour weeks, I had a passion to become more engaged in my community. And I immediately threw myself into doing volunteer consulting. And I soon met the charismatic CEO of SightLife, Monty Montoya. Now Monty, his mission through SightLife is to eliminate corneal blindness worldwide. He's got both the mission and the passion. But his strategy to roll out hundreds of eye banks throughout the developing world was a bit fuzzy. So that's where our worlds came together. To me, it was a clear franchising strategy, right out of the Starbucks playbook. You achieve rapid, sustainable growth, replicating the core operations with some localization. Very simple. So I convinced Monty, and I quickly came on board as head of the global program. The idea became a strategy, the strategy became a program, and we launched, with India as our starting point. It was an incredible 9 months. A good friend of SightLife's Dr. Rao, the man, if you can spot him, he's the man in the bow tie there. He made a number of critical introductions. I organized strategy sessions, met with government officials, NGOs, associations, surgeons, foundations. The strategy quickly gained overall consensus. We approached one of the leading international NGOs and proposed a partnership and requested millions of dollars. In a few months, it appeared that we were making more progress than had been achieved in years. It was a rush, taking the best practices from the for-profit world to solve a social need. And then came the Christmas coup, and reality came crashing in. Here I was curing blindness, and it turned out that I was suffering from blindness as well. As I later learned, there was a major schism in the international NGO we had approached. Some of the leaders were threatened by our challenging their ownership of corneal blindness. So they simply took our strategy and approached other Indian groups with a plan. The main Indian Medical Association decided to shift alliances and chase the money. The surgeons immediately began to question some of the fundamental beliefs underlying the strategy. So back to laying in the dark. As I lay there, questioning my decision to move over into the nonprofit world, I actually remembered a comment that Ron Tanamura said that had been the spark to motivating me to join SVP. Ron's insight was that it had taken him several years as a lead partner to finally realize that he was learning more from the grantee than they were learning from him. But at SightLife, I was so focused on leveraging my Starbucks experience and adding value that I didn't leave myself open to learning and understanding my new environment. The lesson India has taught me is that the best path between point A and B is not necessarily the straight line. I had forced the strategy through without taking the time to develop the relationships and understand all the beliefs that were being challenged. I was being naive after all those years of big corporate politics, assuming that everybody I worked with in this global health initiative was mission-driven. As I was to learn, most of the underlying conflicts were ego-driven, not mission-driven. In the end, it was a few key Indian relationships, like the relationship that SightLife had developed with Dr. Rao over 20 years, that got us back on course. With Dr. Rao's support, we flew back to India, addressed the doctor's concerns at a much more fundamental level. I reached out to the Indian leaders who had shifted their allegiance. I swallowed my anger at the international NGO, and we continued to engage them. Ultimately, their CEO apologized for his organization's behavior, and they withdrew their separate initiative. Today, my focus has shifted from strategy to relationship building, with multiple partnerships established, including one with the international NGO that had led the Christmas coup. It's not easy for me to be patient. Partners can be a pain and a big drain of energy. Before the coup, I viewed my work as an adrenaline-fueled sprint. Now my visualization is climbing that of a tall sand dune, taking 2 steps forward and sliding 1 step back. India is a long ways from Seattle and SVP, but for me, my experience translates. I'm currently the lead partner for the Vietnamese Friendship Association, and you don't need to drive far down MLK Way to enter a different culture. My challenge at VFA is similar. I recognize my effectiveness will be limited until I open myself up to learning and receiving, rather than teaching and giving. You can't teach until you learn. Understanding the players, the culture, the beliefs of our grantees opens us up to growing as individuals and allows us to become more effective members of our community. In closing, after my recent Christmas experience, I now have a reminder above my desk. It's an African proverb. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Thank you.